So yeah, we're going to talk about this morning about being under the influence and what are you under the influence of. So, if you Google that, which I have, most of the things that will come up are things about driving under the influence, of alcohol or drugs or whatever. But there's a lot more to that than controlled substances. Um, and that is every day we're under the influence of something. We're under the influence of what our intention is, what we just read, what just happened to us, the conversation we just had. What is it that we are under the influence of, and are we aware of it? Maybe we're under the influence of something that our mom said to us when we were like an obnoxious teenager, or maybe we're under the influence of something that a boss that we didn't get along with, or a teacher said to us that wasn't for our best good, and maybe we're still under the influence of that. Maybe we haven't been able to let that go. Maybe we are under the influence of some false belief about ourselves. So I think it's something that can have just as much an effect on us as a controlled substance. Mm-hmm. Is that thought process that we haven't let go of, or that doesn't empower us. And then on the other end of it, if we're under the influence of, let's say, you just came from a great church service, or you just came, hey Andrew, how are you? Are you just maybe we're lucky enough to go to a Tony Robbins event, or something that was really positive for you. Like, you could be under the influence of that. I can remember one time, Jerry and my husband and I used to have this had a mentor called Mark Victor Hansen, who wrote all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Him and Jack Canfield, we were in a business with them. Hey Richard, and we used to be able to travel with them and go on cruises with them and play with them, and it was so cool. And I remember coming home from those trips and those cruises, and my husband and I would have appointments set up and go to meet with business people. And we were untouchable. Like, no one could say no to us. We were in such a powerful state. And that might sound weird if you've never experienced it, but it was because of the people that we had spent time with and their influence over us, like their influence over what we believed about ourselves and who we were, like helping us get in touch with that power. And we were totally under their influence, and nobody could say no to us. It was like on such another level of how these people, I'm not saying like there's a hierarchy and people are better than other people. I'm not saying that, but some people do live closer to their source than other people, and it's done very intentionally. And I can just remember being under that influence of them. I don't know how else to say that. And it just affected not only how we felt, but how the energy we put off and how other people felt about us. It was crazy. And it's a wonderful thing to have experienced and to know that we can plug into anytime.
I think it's so nice to know too, like, we choose what influences we want to be under. Like, that is completely in our power. It's one of the choices that we have of what are we going to allow to influence us, and what influences are we going to be under. And so, like, how did you know, like, that would be a good influence for you? I think that's like a good, question for people. Like, how do you know if I should be under this influence? Like, how did you know with him?
Well, I think we follow our emotions, right? Like, when you meet somebody, if it's a good vibe or not, if you feel comfortable in their presence, if you feel supported, and because I had read, before I ever met him, I had read a lot of his books. So I knew what he was about. I knew what Jack and Mark were about. So, of course they were a mentor of mine just from books that I was reading that they had written. So, I mean, I knew I wanted to be with them. I knew that they were, that they lived very close to their source, and that they had already been a very positive influence in my life because I exposed myself to their brain, to what they were about.
So, like, and you kind of had learned ahead of time too about them, which ties into the whole importance of learning. I think too, like, when you're under the influence of something, how it changes your actions, like how you said you were unstoppable. And I think that's why it's so important that we're careful, and that we're educated about the source, the influence we allow into our lives, because the outcome is going to be different no matter what, whatever influence we allow. So if it's a positive influence, a speaker, a mentor, deepening your faith, or if it's a bad influence, like a crabby person, an unhappy person, or, if you're trying to influence your life out of unhappiness using drugs and alcohol. Like, what influences are we allowing into our life? Because the outcome is going to be different. And the other thing I think, though, is we can always change our influences. Like, it's not a stuck thing. So if I feel like, oh, I'm not like having positive influences in my life, I get to change that today. And, real quickly, your outcome is changed.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And, I think our kids are a great example, because can't we all tell, especially if we have teenagers, right? We can tell when they come home who they've been with, like if it's been a good influence or if it's been a bad influence, because sometimes we look at them and we go, who are you? You're not the kid that walked out my door this morning, or you're not the kid that, I had the conversation with 2 nights ago. You're different. And who have you been? Like, I don't interrogate. I don't ask those questions, but I think them. Like, I'm just like, okay, so he has been with somebody who maybe didn't empower him today, and how can I influence him differently? How can I help him have a different influence, right? In terms of believing in him, or thinking positive things about him. Maybe he hasn't been with anybody all day who thought positively about him. That affects us. If we are not around people who don't think positively about us, that affects our energy. And it's like water. If you like aerate water, or put a charcoal stick in water, or put some kind of minerals in water, it changes that water. It can filter it, or it can add minerals to it. And then when you take that water and pour it into another glass of water, like let's say you have 8 ounces of water in a glass, and you take that aerated water or that mineralized water, you pour it into the water that doesn't have anything in it, it changes that water. It becomes something different. And we're the same way. We're the exact same way. Like, that influence that we poured into us, or that we have allowed into us, changes who we are.
I think too, like the point that reminds me is we can, 2 things. One, we can be an influence. We are an influence for other people. So how we bring ourselves into each day. Like, and it's kind of a joke. One of my daughters, we're always like, she's the stick that stirs a drink. So if she is happy, life is amazing. And if she is unhappy, like, everyone scatter, because we are in trouble. But I think, like, it's and like, we're all like that. Some people just, it's more expressed than others, but we all are influencing those we come in contact with at every moment. So how are we changing the lives of others? Secondly, I think people can have a good influence and a bad influence at the same time, or maybe not bad, but neutral. Like, the same daughter, she had some really fun-seeking friends in high school, and her and I did some heavy parenting, but they were like girls and guys that maybe would lead her to choices that I wouldn't want her to make. But on the other hand, they were amazing girls who strived really hard in school, and like, they are amazing women who are doing, like, great things. And so there was this both influence. And I think in any relationships we have, there's probably dual influence, and we have to really choose the positive things and maybe try to affect the less positive in others.
Well, we all have phases in our life, and maybe at one phase somebody's good for us, and in another phase they're not, right? So again, it's always our choice who we allow and what we allow, and again, how we show up for other people. What kind of influence are we going to be for them?
How empowering!
Hey, Joanne, I didn't say hi to you.
It's so empowering that we can affect ourselves each day by the influences we allow in, and we can also affect others by the influences we give out.
Exactly. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the morning, or 8:30ish. Thanks for joining, and think about your influence today, and what you're allowing in, and what you're under the influence of, because we get to choose.
We get to choose. Bye.
Bye.